I still remember the way the doctor's face turned white. His eyes froze on the toxicology report like he'd seen a ghost. What they found in my bloodstream wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a prank. It was attempted murder. The killer? My own sister. My name is Sharon. I'm 24, born with a heart condition that can stop me anytime. I've lived careful, quiet, grateful. Until the day my sister switched my medication. Until the moment my pulse turned into a countdown. When I collapsed at work, my parents begged me to keep quiet. They said Madison didn't mean it. But silence almost buried me once. I won't let it again. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, you'll understand what came next. They called it a prank. The lab called it attempted murder. Madison has always been the golden one. Pretty, charming, reckless in a way our parents adored. I was the fragile one. The quiet sister with the weak heart. They loved to compare us. She's so full of life, Sharon should be more like her. I used to laugh it off. Until the jokes started cutting deeper. Pill popper Sharon, she'd whisper behind my back. A pharmacy tech with easy access to everything I depended on. My life sat in the same cabinet she had keys to. Then came Travis. Tattoos, no job, eyes like trouble. Madison called him exciting. My parents called him interesting. I called him a walking red flag. Weeks before it happened, Madison hovered whenever I took my meds. She'd smirk. What happens if you skip a dose, Shar? Would you just drop? I thought she was joking. I always thought she was joking. The morning it happened felt ordinary. Same kitchen light. Same little white pills. I swallowed them, packed my bag, left for work. 2 hours later, my chest caught fire. My pulse exploded. I couldn't breathe. Jenny, my coworker, screamed for help as my body folded. Then, nothing. I woke up to sirens and cold hands on my skin. Paramedics shouting numbers I didn't understand. Heart rate spiking. Blood pressure crashing. I thought my condition had finally won. But at the hospital, Dr. Martinez looked confused. He said my symptoms didn't match any cardiac episode. He ordered toxicology just to be safe. That's when my parents rushed in. Tears, panic, and Madison clinging to me. She leaned close, whispering through fake sobs. Don't you dare say anything about your pills. Her breath on my ear felt colder than the oxygen mask. I wanted to scream, but my voice stayed trapped inside my chest. My parents begged for silence. Right before the truth started screaming. The days after the hospital blurred together. Everything smelled like antiseptic and fear. Every beep from a monitor made my heart skip twice. Dr. Martinez said I was lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my trust. At home, the silence was louder than the machines. My parents called daily, begging me not to talk to police. Think about Madison's future, my mother cried. Her words hit harder than the cardiac episode. Even now they were protecting her. Not me. Jake stayed. He moved into my apartment without asking. Just started making tea and locking the doors twice. When I couldn't sleep, he'd read headlines out loud. Each one spelling my humiliation in bold. Local woman poisoned by sister. Pharmacy tech under investigation. Millbrook turned into a fishbowl overnight. Reporters waited outside my building. Neighbors whispered in grocery aisles. I stopped going out altogether. The pills terrified me. Even sealed in blister packs, they looked guilty. Each dose felt like Russian roulette. My hands shook whenever I opened the box. Jake would hold the glass of water steady. Breathe, he'd say softly. I tried. Sometimes I failed. Then came the call from Dr. Martinez. The police are requesting access to Madison's pharmacy records. Something in his tone told me this wasn't just about negligence. It was about intent. 2 days later, a woman named Rebecca Chen knocked on my door. District attorney. Sharp eyes. No small talk. She laid out photos, timelines, and text transcripts like puzzle pieces. We believe this wasn't an accident, she said. Her voice was steady, but mine broke. Are you saying she meant to kill me? She nodded once. Cold. Precise. Certain. That night, I stared at my ceiling for hours. The fan blades turned slowly, slicing through the dark. I thought about Madison's smirk, about my mother's tears, about the taste of metal when my heart almost stopped. If this was what family looked like, I wasn't sure I wanted one anymore. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. From that night on, I started writing everything down. Times, conversations, every message my parents sent. If they wanted silence, I'd answer with proof. Each word I wrote felt like stitching myself back together. The fear didn't disappear, but it finally had boundaries. I stopped shaking. I started watching. And somewhere between fear and fury, I found my pulse again. The next morning, my phone rang. Dr. Martinez's voice trembled. Sharon, we need to talk. The report's back. When the full report landed, the doctor wouldn't sit down. The next morning, I walked into Dr. Martinez's office. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from him. Sit down, Sharon, he said quietly. His hands were trembling. I need to show you something. A thick folder sat on the desk. Lab results, printed screenshots, photocopies of prescription logs from the pharmacy. He opened the folder slowly, like he was afraid of what might crawl out of it. The toxicology results came back, he said. It's not just Adderall in your system. My throat tightened. What else? He slid a page toward me. Pseudoephedrine, caffeine pills, phenylephrine. Each word hit like a nail in my chest. All stimulants, he continued, chosen specifically to amplify the danger for someone with your heart condition. He wasn't finished. The police reviewed your sister's search history. She looked up drug interactions with metoprolol, how to cause arrhythmia, how to make it look like a natural heart attack. I stared at the printed screenshots, searches dated weeks before the incident. Each one more specific, each one colder. She also stole medications from her pharmacy, he said. Security cameras caught her taking samples during shipments. He flipped another page. Still photos of Madison in her CVS uniform, sliding bottles into her bag. My stomach turned to stone. This wasn't a prank. This was a process. Then Dr. Martinez's voice broke. Sharon, your parents' insurance policy lists Madison as your secondary beneficiary. I blinked. What? She and her boyfriend were planning to collect it. The police found text messages. He passed me another sheet. Screenshots of Madison and Travis. When she dies, the payout will clear everything. Her heart's already weak. It'll look natural. We just have to be patient. The room started spinning. Every sound faded except my heartbeat. Fast, heavy, mechanical. All the times Madison smirked. The questions about my pills. The fake tears. They all snapped into focus. She hadn't been curious. She'd been calculating. I covered my mouth, but the sobs came anyway. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was arithmetic, and I was the equation she wanted solved. Dr. Martinez's eyes were wet. I'm so sorry, Sharon. This was never about sibling rivalry. It was about profit. I walked out into the hallway, legs shaking, hands cold as glass. People passed by, smiling, as if the world hadn't just shifted under me. The truth wasn't freeing. It was heavier than the lie. Outside, the wind felt sharper, the sunlight almost cruel. I pressed my palm over my chest, feeling the steady beat she tried to steal. For the first time since the attack, I wasn't afraid of my heart racing. I was ready to use it. This wasn't jealousy. It was arithmetic with my life. The courtroom smelled like old wood and nerves. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, palms pressed together to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle sat Madison, hair neat, face pale, eyes glassy like she'd rehearsed regret. My parents were right behind her, hands clasped, whispering prayers for leniency. Not for me, for her. District Attorney Rebecca Chen stood tall beside me. When she spoke, the room fell silent. This wasn't a mistake, she told the jury. This was method. Months of research, theft, and calculation. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. The search logs, the stolen meds, the insurance policy. Each exhibit was another knife turned toward Madison. When the defense rose, Madison's attorney smiled like a man selling mercy. She was young, impulsive, influenced by her boyfriend. He turned toward me. Isn't it true, Miss Patterson, that you've always been jealous of your sister's popularity? The courtroom blurred for a second, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. No, I said. I've never been jealous of Madison's life. I just wanted to keep mine. He blinked. The jury leaned closer. Chen didn't need to say a word. Dr. Martinez testified next, calm but furious. The drug combination wasn't random, he said. It required research and intent. If Sharon had been alone that day, she would have died. Gasps rippled through the room. Madison started crying, but her tears sounded rehearsed. Then Travis testified. He'd taken a plea deal. She planned it, he said. She wanted the money, the sympathy, and a life without her sister. Every word burned. Every confession felt like a second heartbeat. Louder, steadier, angrier. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand, feeling every eye on me. I trusted her, I said. I trusted all of them. And they used that trust as a weapon. My voice didn't shake this time. She didn't steal my pills. She stole my peace. And my parents asked me to forgive her for it. My mother wept. My father looked away. Madison stared at the floor. The verdict came fast. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, theft, conspiracy. Madison collapsed in her chair. My parents rushed to hold her, while I sat perfectly still, watching the truth finally outgrow the lies. Rebecca Chen placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. But it wasn't. Outside the courthouse, my parents refused to meet my eyes. "You could have asked for mercy," my mother said. "You could have saved her." I turned to her slowly. "I did," I said. "I saved her the effort of killing me again." They wanted mercy for my attacker, so I chose mercy for myself. 6 months after the trial, my parents lost everything. The house, my father's business, whatever reputation we still had. They called once, asking for help. I didn't answer. I'd given enough of my life to their silence. A year later, my father died of a heart attack. 2 months after that, my mother crashed her car on an icy road. I was listed as the beneficiary on their life insurance. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used the money to move across the country. Seattle rain felt cleaner somehow, like it didn't remember my family name. Jake came with me. We bought a small house on the edge of the city, where the mornings were quiet, and the pills finally felt safe to swallow again. Madison wrote from prison once. 3 pages. An apology without excuses. I read it, then folded it back into the envelope, and locked it away. Forgiveness isn't owed. It's earned. And some debts can't be repaid. I've learned that family isn't blood. It's the people who keep you alive, when everyone else pretends not to notice you're dying. Jake is my family now. The life I built is my family. And my heartbeat, steady, stubborn mine, is proof I survived them all. Sometimes I still dream of Madison. In the dream, she's holding the bottle of pills again. Only this time, I'm the one watching her swallow. I wake up before she chokes. That's how I know I've healed. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without breaking. It's breathing without fear. And it's finally understanding. I don't owe anyone my silence ever again. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. Some bridges save your life the moment you burn them. Before saying goodbye, if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true family betrayal stories. That reminds us we are stronger than we think.
My mother was fixing Heather's veil when Daniel and I arrived at the church. Her hands moved with care, smoothing lace like it was sacred. I hadn't seen that look on her face in years, focused, glowing, almost tender. Certainly not on my wedding day. That thought came before I could stop it, so I swallowed it like I always did. Heather, my younger sister, was getting married. 29 kindergarten teacher, everyone's sunshine, the golden girl. And today, the sun was shining just for her. Daniel, my husband, leaned toward me as we found our seats. He gave my hand a quiet squeeze. "10,000's in my inside pocket," he said, tapping his suit jacket. "You sure about this?" I nodded. "It's her wedding." He didn't say more. We'd already paid for 1/3 of the reception, but I didn't want to discuss money today. I told myself this wasn't the time. That became my mantra. As I sat down, I scanned the rows ahead. My father, Frank, was laughing with one of Heather's in-laws, looking younger than I remembered, shirt-tucked, crisp tie, straight back upright. He used to slouch. Carol, my mother, sat next to him, turning every so often to check on the altar as if she couldn't believe today was really happening. She caught my eye, once offered a polite smile. I smiled back. Then she turned away. Nothing cold, just distant. Like I was someone else's cousin, not her eldest daughter. The music began. Heather walked in on Frank's arm, and Carol's eyes welled instantly. Daniel leaned a little toward me again, just enough that his shoulder pressed against mine. I don't think he meant anything by it. Maybe he just knew. The ceremony was short, sweet, traditional. Heather cried at the vows. Ryan, her new husband, choked a little too. They looked happy, radiant even. As they kissed, the guests clapped and stood, some already pulling out phones. I clapped too. My palms felt stiff. I hadn't expected to feel so out of place. But watching my parents glow, shine and beam as if nothing else in the world mattered, but this moment, it hit harder than I'd thought. I told myself I was being sensitive, that I was overthinking. Still, I couldn't help but wonder. Did they ever look like that at me? The reception was held in a converted barn, strings of white lights, mismatched wooden chairs, lavender tied to every napkin. It was tasteful, expensive, and well organized. I knew because I helped organize it. Not that anyone mentioned that out loud. Dinner passed in a blur of polite conversation. Daniel chatted with Ryan's uncle about real estate. I picked at my chicken. My parents were seated at the long head table beside Heather and Ryan, beaming like royalty. I stayed 2 rows down with Daniel smiling when someone looked our way, nodding when Heather glanced over. Then came the toasts. The best man, one of Ryan's college friends, kept it short and full of inside jokes. Heather's maid of honor, her childhood best friend, cried halfway through hers. Then my mother rose holding a champagne flute with both hands. My father stood beside her, clearing his throat. "Thank you all," my mother began, tapping her glass once. "We're so grateful to see so many of you here to celebrate our beloved daughter's wedding. Beloved," it hit like a pin under my rib. "She's always brought joy into our lives," Frank added. "Always been full of light." Daniel's hand slipped over mine again. I smiled tightly and nodded the same way I had smiled through my own wedding dinner when Mom had stood up and merely said, "We're glad Martha found someone." But now they were practically glowing. My mother reached into her clutch and pulled out a small stack of papers. "Jake, sorry, Ryan, and Heather," she corrected herself with a laugh. "Your father and I wanted to give you something meaningful, something to begin your life together." She held the papers up. "We're giving you the family home." The words dropped like a stone in a silent room. Then applause, cheers, clinking glasses. People stood to clap. Heather covered her mouth with one hand, eyes watering. Ryan looked stunned. I felt nothing at first, not even shock. I just stared. Daniel went rigid beside me. The house, that house. The same house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 5 years. The same house Mom and Dad had begged me to help save when Dad's hours were cut at the plant and Mom's arthritis made full-time work impossible. We never made it a formal agreement. No contracts, no paperwork. Just, "Sweetheart, we're falling behind. We'd pay you back if we could." And I said yes. Quietly. Every month. For 5 years. They hadn't mentioned this plan. Not once. No heads up. No discussion. My mouth stayed closed. My smile didn't move. Heather cried, hugged our parents. Ryan kissed her on the cheek. People around us were whispering, "How generous, so beautiful, such a blessing." Daniel leaned in. "Did you know?" I shook my head, lips tight. When Heather walked past our table later, she squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Can you believe it?" Her eyes shone like someone who'd just won the lottery. But there was something behind it. Something too calm. She had known. Daniel and I left an hour later. Early enough not to raise alarms. "Daniel has an early meeting," I told a few people. So happy for them. Just tired. In the car, I didn't say a word until we were on the highway. Then the tears came fast and hot. I gripped my dress like I might tear it open. "I don't care about the house," I said, voice cracking. "It's the not asking. It's pretending like I was never part of it." Daniel didn't answer right away. His hand stayed steady on the wheel. "You were more than part of it. You carried it. They just didn't want to remember that." We drove the rest of the way home in silence. Not the sharp kind. Just tired. The kind where words feel too small for what you're holding back. I washed my face and changed into pajamas before I said anything else. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, untying his shoes. He looked at me like he was waiting gently, like he always did. "They didn't even hesitate," I said finally. Just stood up there and gave it away like I was a footnote. He didn't interrupt. He knew better than to rush this kind of grief. I sat beside him, the fabric of my robe soft between my fingers. "It's not just the house," I whispered. "It's that they didn't even think it might hurt me." Daniel placed his hand over mine, warm and steady. And that's when the rest of it started tumbling out. I told him about my graduation, how Mom handed me a card with $50 and said, "Spend it wisely." How 2 years later, Heather got a silver Honda with a big red bow in the driveway. "She's just starting out," they said, like I hadn't been. I told him about my 21st birthday, how Mom and Dad said they couldn't come to dinner because Heather had a volleyball game, not a championship, just a game, and they'd already promised her. I remembered things I hadn't let myself remember. The way Dad always answered Heather's calls on the first ring, but let mine go to voicemail. The time Mom skipped my promotion dinner to babysit for Heather's dog. Daniel listened silent, but with that wrinkle between his eyes that only showed up when something really hurt him on my behalf. I didn't care at the time, I said. I told myself they were just busy, that I was being dramatic. But now, I looked down at my lap. Now it feels like I was invisible. Just the person they counted on when they needed money, not someone they loved. Daniel shifted closer. You weren't invisible to me. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He smelled like clean linen and cologne. Like home. I just kept thinking I said if I worked harder, helped more, they'd see me. Really see me. He didn't say what I already knew. They saw exactly what they wanted, and what they wanted was someone who didn't ask for anything in return. 3 weeks passed. I kept my head down at work, answered only the calls I had to, and left my phone face down every evening. No one mentioned the wedding. No one mentioned the house. The silence was both mercy and punishment. Then one evening my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen since that night. Mom Carol. I stared at it for 2 rings, 3, then picked up. Her voice came through bright like nothing had happened. Martha, honey. We're having a little family dinner this weekend. Heather and Ryan are back from their honeymoon. We'd love to see you and Daniel. Just something casual. I wanted to say no. I wanted to hang up. But a quiet, irrational part of me, the part that still hoped for fairness, thought maybe they'd say, sorry. Or at least explain. So I said, sure. We'll come. Saturday came fast. Daniel drove. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, staring out the window. The closer we got, the more it felt like approaching someone else's home, not the one I'd been paying for. Heather's SUV sat in the driveway. My parents' old sedan was beside it. I hesitated at the front door before ringing the bell. I no longer had a key. Carol opened the door, cheeks flushed like she'd been laughing. Martha, Daniel. Come in, come in. She hugged me like nothing was wrong. I let her stiffly. Inside, Frank was watching a game with Ryan. He gave Daniel a firm handshake and offered me a distracted hug. Glad you made it, he said, eyes already turning back to the screen. I scanned the room. Where's Heather changing curtains in the dining room? Mom said cheerfully. She's been redecorating all week. I followed the sound of fabric and soft clinks. There she was, standing on a small ladder, replacing Mom's old blue curtains with cream ones. She glanced down, smiled, and said nothing. Dinner was Mom's pot roast, the one she used to make when company came over. The table was crowded, and I was seated between Daniel and Frank. Across from me, Carol and Heather. Ryan took the end. Heather and Ryan spent the first 10 minutes detailing their honeymoon in Maui, every meal, every towel animal, every snorkel spot. I nodded when it seemed right. Daniel asked just enough questions to keep things moving. Then Carol cleared her throat. So she began tone light. We wanted to talk to you about something, Martha. Here it was. As you know, she said, we've given the house to Heather and Ryan. They're starting their life. They need space. I nodded slowly, letting her continue. Frank shifted in his seat. What your mother's trying to say is we can't stay here anymore. I put down my fork. We've decided, Carol said, that we'd like to move into your lake cottage. It's perfect for us. Quiet, peaceful, just the right size. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence stretch until everyone felt it. Let me get this straight, I said. You gave the house I was paying for to Heather, and now you want to move into my property, without asking. Frank frowned. Be reasonable, Martha. Where else are we supposed to go? That's not my problem, I said. Heather's voice piped in. It's not like you use it that much. I turned to her. It's mine. I bought it. I decide who's in it. Carol's face paled. You're not saying no, are you? I am, I said calmly. No, you're not moving into my cottage. 2 weeks passed without a word. I blocked their numbers, not forever, just until I could think without shaking. The cottage stayed untouched, quiet and safe in my mind, like a door I had finally locked. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing ad copy at my desk, my phone buzzed. Security alert, front door opened, Pine Ridge Cottage. My stomach dropped. I opened the app. Someone had used a key but hadn't disabled the alarm. 30 seconds later, the security company called. Miss Whitman, this is Safeguard Security. We've detected entry at your property on Pine Ridge Road. Was that you? No, I said. Send the police. An hour later, my phone rang again. A calm, male voice. Miss Whitman, this is Officer Rhea with the County Sheriff's Department. We're at your Pine Ridge property with two individuals who identify as your parents. They have keys, but admit they don't have your permission to be here. I closed my eyes. Of course it was them. Yes, I said. They are my parents, but they do not have permission to be in my home. I understand. Because they used a key and not force, it's a gray area. We can remove them, but pressing charges would be up to you. I'll come up, I said. We're about an hour away. Daniel drove. Neither of us said much. I was too angry to speak, too tired to yell. Somewhere in the middle of that silence, I realized I wasn't surprised. Hurt, yes, but not surprised. The cottage appeared as we rounded the bend, pine trees gravel crunching under the tires, and in front a police cruiser. 2 officers. And on the porch, Frank and Carol sitting stiffly among a few suitcases and plastic bins. Frank stood when he saw me. Martha, thank God. Tell them it's a misunderstanding. I walked past him and up to the officers. Thank you for coming. Yes, these are my parents, but they do not have permission to be here. One officer nodded. Do you want to press charges? Carol stood now. Martha, you wouldn't. You broke into my house after I told you no, I said. What did you think would happen? Frank's voice rose. We didn't break in. We used the key you gave us. Carol's voice cracked open. This is all your fault. If you'd just let us stay, none of this would have happened. I stared at her. My fault. You gave away a house I was paying for and then tried to take over my other property without even asking. And now you're sitting here acting like I'm the one who betrayed you? You're so arrogant, she spat. So selfish. We raised you better than this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You didn't raise me to be a doormat. That shut her up. I turned to the officers. Can I speak to you privately? They stepped away with me. I took a breath. I don't want to press charges, but I don't want them here either. We can bring them in for a few hours, one officer offered. Let them cool off. Sometimes a holding cell puts things in perspective. I nodded. That sounds about right. Back on the porch, I said simply, they're taking you in for a few hours. I'm not pressing charges, but you cannot be here. Carol looked stunned. Frank said nothing. As the cruiser pulled away, Daniel slipped his hand in mine. We waited for the locksmith. While he worked, I arranged for their things to be moved to a nearby storage unit. I paid for 1 month. I sent the information to Heather. I didn't unblock anyone. By the time the new locks clicked into place, the house felt clean again. Mine again. 2 days later, I opened Facebook and saw my mother's face smiling back at me from a post I hadn't expected and would never forget. Today, I learned what it means to be abandoned by your own child. The caption went on for 6 paragraphs, how she and Frank in their golden years were cast out like unwanted pets, how I, their eldest daughter, had called the police and had them removed like criminals, leaving them with nowhere to go, no roof, no compassion. The post was public. There were already dozens of comments, some from old neighbors, some from family, some from people I hadn't seen since childhood. I can't believe she'd do that to you. So many kids these days have no sense of duty. That girl always was cold, even in church. I sat there staring at my screen, letting the bile rise slowly, steadily, until Daniel leaned over and read it with me. Are you going to respond? He asked gently. I didn't answer right away. I just opened a blank status and started typing. Since my mother has chosen to make our private conflict public, I feel I need to share a few facts. I wrote carefully. Not with anger, but clarity. I listed how I had paid the mortgage on their home for 5 years, how they gave that home to Heather and Ryan without ever mentioning it to me, how they'd planned again without asking to move into my lake cottage, and when I said no, how they used a spare key, entered my property without permission, and triggered a police response. I ended simply, family is about mutual respect, not entitlement, not rewriting history. Then I hit post. The response came fast, messages, comments, private DMs. From cousins we had no idea. From my aunt in Ohio, I wish you'd said something sooner. Your mom's version didn't sit right. Even from Frank's old coworker, you paid the mortgage. Then she gave the house away. Jesus. The shame didn't lift, but the weight shifted. I wasn't vindictive, but I was done being silent. 3 days later, my cousin Linda called. I just thought you should know, she said, her voice low. Your parents tried to go back to the house. I didn't speak. I waited. Heather wouldn't let them in, she continued. She told them it's her house now, that there's no room for them. I let the words settle, not out of disbelief, just confirmation. Linda sighed. They're staying in some apartment off Route 12. Real small, month-to-month lease. Your mom took a part-time job at the pharmacy. She says it's temporary. I thanked her and hung up. Daniel looked up from the sink when I came into the kitchen. What is it? They went to Heather's, I said. She turned them away. He raised his eyebrows. After all that, I nodded. They're in a rented apartment now. Mom's working again. I expected to feel satisfaction. I didn't. I felt tired. That night, I stared at my phone for a long time. One new voicemail, my mother's voice softer than I remembered. We made a mistake, a big one. Please call us. We need to talk. I deleted it. Maybe one day I'd want to hear her say the words. But not now. Not when everything still felt so sharp. Instead, I listed the lake cottage for rent. I didn't need it empty and echoing anymore. It could pay for itself. Someone else could drink coffee on the porch. Daniel asked as we got into bed, Do you think you'll ever forgive them? I thought about it. Maybe. Not for them. For me. He nodded, turned off the light. I lay in the dark and breathed. I wasn't trying to be the favorite anymore. I wasn't even trying to be understood. The next morning, another call came. I let it ring. No voicemail this time. Maybe she didn't know what else to say. Maybe that silence was her way of finally listening. I watched the screen until it went dark. Outside, the sky was overcast. A soft gray that promised rain, but not drama, just a slow, quiet washing. I poured my coffee, sat by the window, and didn't answer. If Heather was the daughter they chose, then they can live with that choice. I'm Catherine Sanders. I turned 32 last spring, and for most of my life, I've known exactly where I stood in my family behind my sister. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, was the golden child. She got the smiles, the praise, the second helpings, and the better room. She did everything right, at least according to our parents. She married at 24, had 2 boys, by 27 baked casseroles from scratch, and sent out Christmas cards in September. And me, I stayed single, focused on my career, rented a quiet apartment across town where no one asked why I still hadn't settled down. I had a 401k, a Roth IRA, and no intention of asking anyone for help. Apparently, those things don't count when you're not wearing a ring. My parents, Linda and Jerry, never said it outright, but their questions always carried a weight. Don't you want children before it's too late? Your sister's boys are growing so fast. It's a shame they don't have cousins. You're still in that apartment, huh? I learned to nod and change the subject. I used to think if I worked hard enough, maybe they'd finally see me the way they saw Rachel. But the truth settled in slow like dust you stop noticing on the shelves. I wasn't the daughter they bragged about. I was the one they assumed would be fine no matter what. Still, I never complained. I visited on holidays, helped fix the Wi-Fi, brought wine when they forgot birthdays, mine included. And for the most part, I kept my distance. It felt safer that way. I didn't know back then that distance wouldn't be enough, that one day they'd try to pull me in so tightly I'd barely recognize myself. Rachel's picture-perfect life began to come apart the way fine china does, quietly at first, then all at once. Her husband David had been cheating for years. She found the messages by accident. Or maybe she was finally ready to stop pretending she didn't see what was already there. When she filed for divorce, no one blamed her. Not even our parents. David disappeared shortly after, no child support, no apology, just gone. Rachel was left with 2 boys, Ethan and Jamie, and a stack of bills she couldn't carry alone. Our parents were supportive in words, but their savings were tied up in retirement and sentiment. Rachel moved into a 2-bedroom apartment where the boys shared a room and the wallpaper peeled in the corners. I didn't think twice. I paid her attorney's retainer. I covered 6 months of rent when her part-time hours at the community center weren't enough. I even watched the kids a few weekends so she could breathe. I never brought it up, never expected anything back. I loved my nephews. And Rachel, for all her past glory, looked broken, like someone who wasn't used to asking for help and hated needing it. Still, I thought maybe now our parents would see the truth. Maybe this time they'd understand I wasn't the one with something to prove. They didn't. Instead, every conversation with Mom began with an update on Rachel's pain, followed by a question about whether I was seeing anyone yet. I kept quiet, helped where I could, told myself family meant showing up even when you were tired of being invisible. But the thing about always being the responsible one is eventually people start assuming your help isn't a gift, it's a given. It was a Wednesday when my mother called. "Catherine, honey, we have such good news. Can you come by tonight?" Her voice had a brightness I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. I thought for a second that David had resurfaced, that the courts had finally found him, or that Rachel's life had turned a corner. "Is it about the boys or the child support?" I asked. No. Even better, she said. "Just come over. Your father's already home and Rachel will be here too." I drove across town after work, tired but curious. There was something off about her tone, too, rehearsed, too smooth, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe for once it really was good news. When I walked into the living room, they were already seated, Dad on the recliner, Mom perched on the edge of the couch, Rachel beside her smiling nervously. On the coffee table sat a manila folder. "There she is," Dad said, standing to hug me, then handing me the folder. "Take a look." Inside was a stack of documents heavy with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, mortgage agreement. "What is this?" I asked. "It's for Rachel's new house," Mom beamed. "We used most of our savings and some of the retirement for the down payment." "Isn't it wonderful?" I blinked. "You bought a house?" "Yes," she said. "A lovely place, 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys. They need stability. This apartment just isn't enough." I looked at Rachel, who gave a small nod but said nothing. "That's great," I said honestly. "The boys will love that." I started to hand the folder back. No, those are for you," Mom said, pushing it toward me again. "What do you mean for me?" Dad cleared his throat. "We've talked about this as a family and we've decided you'll take over the mortgage. You've been saving for years. You can make the payments easily." "Rachel can't afford it," Mom added gently. "She's doing everything she can, but the boys need this." The room went silent. I felt every eye on me. "You're asking me to pay for Rachel's house?" I asked. Rachel still wouldn't meet my eyes. After David left, I have nothing," she murmured. "I can't give them what they need without help." I looked at the mortgage again. The amount was staggering. "I already paid for her divorce," I said quietly. "And half a year of rent. I've been saving for 10 years for my own home," Sweetheart Mom said, reaching for my hand. "We raised you. We've done so much. Isn't it time to give back?" I stood up, heart pounding. "You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I'd cover it." Dad didn't deny it. "You don't have a husband or children," he said flatly. "I'm not doing this," I said. "This isn't help. This is manipulation." I left the folder on the table unopened, and I walked out before I could start screaming. I thought they'd cool down. I told myself they'd realize how absurd it all was, that asking your unmarried daughter to pay for her sister's house wasn't something most people would defend. I was wrong. The first call came that Saturday from my cousin Tiffany, someone I hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. "April told me what happened," she said. No hello, no pause. "I can't believe you're being so cold." "Excuse me?" I asked. "Rachel's a single mom, Catherine. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on all that money and won't help." I gripped the counter. "Tiffany, you don't know the full story. I know enough. Family helps family." Before I could respond, she added, "Rachel would do the same for you." I almost laughed, bitter, involuntary. "No, she wouldn't," I said quietly. "You're unbelievable," she snapped and hung up. The texts started after that. Then voicemails. People I barely knew, Uncle Don, Jessica, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, piling on. The messages blurred together. "You're selfish. They raised you. She has children. You don't. What struck me most wasn't the anger. It was the certainty, as if they knew beyond doubt that I was wrong, that because I hadn't built a family of my own, I was now fair game to fund someone else's. The worst came from Aunt Pat, my mom's older sister. She called during dinner. "I just want to talk some sense into you," she said in that sugary tone she'd perfected. "You're not getting younger, Catherine. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way you'd be contributing to your family's future. So because I'm single, I said I owe Rachel a house. Don't be dramatic. They need help. And you, well, you're in a position to give it." That night, I blocked every number that had chimed in, one by one. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve my peace. And deep down, I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about the house. It never was. 2 months passed. I didn't hear from my parents, Rachel, or anyone else I hadn't already blocked. I poured myself into work, walked in the mornings, let silence become something close to peace. Then the envelope arrived. It came on a Thursday, thick, official-looking. I thought it was insurance paperwork at first, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were suing me. Linda and Jerry Sanders. My parents had filed a formal civil claim. They were demanding $350,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to Catherine Sanders' upbringing. I read it twice, 3 times. Each line was colder than the last. They listed food clothing education. They included a section titled Emotional Support During Adolescence, which I couldn't read without laughing. They even tried to count vacations from when I was 6. And at the end, in plain language funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the Sanders property purchased for Rachel Sanders and her minor children. They weren't subtle. They didn't even pretend it was about principle. I called the best lawyer I could find. Jennifer Madsen met with me the next day. She wore glasses, spoke like she'd seen worse, and didn't blink once while I explained everything. "They have no legal right to your money," she said flatly, flipping through the packet. "Parents are obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no legal expectation of repayment." "So why sue me?" I asked. Jennifer shrugged. "Pressure tactic. They think you'll give in to avoid court, or they genuinely believe you owe them." I felt numb, then angry, then ashamed for feeling either. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything. Proof of the $7,200 I'd paid for Rachel's rent, the $5,500 check to her divorce attorney, bank transfers to my parents over the years, $500 here, $1,000 there. Texts from my mother asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. I found receipts I didn't remember keeping. Pulled records from old email accounts. Every line was a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. When the court date came, I wore gray slacks and a blouse my grandmother had given me years ago. I brought only what I needed, and Walter and Maggie, who showed up in quiet defiance of their own daughter. Grandma squeezed my hand. "What they're doing isn't right," she whispered. "But you already know that." Across the aisle, my parents sat with Rachel beside them. She looked anywhere but at me. I told myself to breathe, not to hope. This wasn't about changing their minds. It was about proving mine still mattered. The courtroom was colder than it should have been in the middle of summer. The walls were beige, the carpet thin. I remember wondering who had picked the chairs, hard plastic unyielding like they were built to punish waiting. My parents sat on the left, Rachel between them. Aunts and uncles behind people who hadn't sent me a birthday card in years now here to support the family. On my side sat just 2 Grandpa Walt and Grandma Maggie. She wore a brooch I hadn't seen since I was a child. When she leaned over to squeeze my hand, I almost broke. Then the judge walked in. He looked to be in his 60s, gray at the temples, glasses low on his nose. The kind of man who didn't rush to speak because he'd already heard every kind of lie. My father stood first. "Your Honor," he began, "we're not unreasonable people, but we invested our lives, our money, our time into raising Catherine. We're only asking for a portion of that back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge didn't blink. Specifically, he said, flipping a page, "What did you spend on her education after she turned 18? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Rachel had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established. So, the judge clarified, you did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses. No, Mom said quickly. But my mother, Catherine's grandmother, did. And since she's my mother, I'd argue we supported her indirectly. From behind me, Grandma let out the faintest scoff. Jennifer rose. Calm. Methodical. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Sanders has been financially independent since the age of 18. In addition, she has provided repeated financial support to both her parents and a sister. She handed over the file bank transfers receipts emails. This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 to her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during times they reported financial hardship. The judge reviewed quietly, then looked up. So the defendant wasn't receiving support but giving it correct, Jennifer said. My mother shifted in her seat. That money isn't relevant, she argued. We're talking about the cost of raising her food shelter emotional guidance. Why exactly, the judge asked, do you need $350,000 now? Mom hesitated, looked at Rachel. To help Rachel pay off the mortgage, she said softly. Silence. Even Uncle Don shifted uncomfortably behind her. The judge turned to Rachel. Ms. Sanders, do you believe your sister should be responsible for your home loan? Rachel finally looked up. She's not married. She doesn't have children. I do. And that creates a financial obligation, he asked. We're family. The judge raised an eyebrow. I'm not married either. Should I pay for my clerk's rent or my bailiff's children? Rachel blinked, said nothing. The judge turned back to my parents. Did you financially support Catherine after she became an adult? We were helping Rachel, Dad repeated. So you prioritized one daughter over another. He said it plainly. No accusation, just fact. They didn't answer. For the next hour, he asked hard questions. Not cruel, but unflinching. Why did they assume I would pay? Why purchase a house they knew Rachel couldn't afford? Why tie help to guilt and guilt to debt? They gave the kind of answers that collapse under their own weight. When we stepped outside, Grandma hugged me first. You were steady, she said. That's more than I can say for anyone else in that room. I wasn't sure if I'd won. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one on trial. The verdict came 1 week later. The courtroom felt smaller the second time. Maybe because I was finally breathing in it. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Sanders, the financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He glanced down at his notes, then back up. In fact, the evidence suggests Ms. Catherine Sanders has already provided significant financial support to both you and her sister. Then quietly, but not softly, frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing. Dismissed. Just like that. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just stood there while Jennifer smiled and Grandma squeezed my arm and Grandpa whispered, "You're free." I thought it was over. It wasn't. A week later, I got a call from Grandma. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said, voice tired. She asked us to release her inheritance early. For what I asked, though, I already knew. To pay off Rachel's mortgage, she said. I sat down. "What did you say I told her? We haven't decided who gets what. That the will is ours to manage." Did she get angry? "No," Grandma said. She cried. She begged us not to disinherit her. I didn't know what hurt more, that she asked, or that she cried over money, not me. Months passed. Quiet ones. I closed on a small house, nothing big, but mine. I painted the kitchen yellow planted tomatoes, adopted a gray cat that slept beside my laptop every night. Rachel rented out her house, moved back in with our parents. Mom babysat while Rachel worked. Somehow they made it work. I didn't call. I didn't write. Then, almost a year after the trial, an email landed in my inbox. No subject line. Just this, "We heard you bought a house. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Rachel and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad." I read it twice. I didn't get angry. I just replied, I will not be hosting Rachel or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again. Then I hit send, blocked the email, and made tea. These days, my house smells like fresh basil and coffee. The cat marble gray and solemn sits on the windowsill most mornings watching birds he'll never chase. I painted the kitchen yellow like I always said I would, and the tomatoes out back are finally coming in. It's quiet here, no voices raised, no questions I don't want to answer. Grandma and Grandpa visit often. They bring pie or old newspaper clippings they think I'll like. Grandpa helps with the gutters. Grandma still reminds me to lock my windows at night, even though I've got a security system. They don't talk about my parents unless I ask, and I rarely do. One Sunday, as we sat on the porch swing, Grandma said, "Your mother's still talking about you, still telling people you abandoned Rachel." I didn't answer. Your Aunt Pat told her to stop bringing it up at family gatherings, said no one wants to hear it anymore. That part made me smile. I'm not naive. I know they still think I failed some unspoken test of loyalty, that I should have stepped up even if it meant laying down everything I'd built. But I also know this, I sleep better now. Rachel, from what I hear, is still living at home, renting out the house to cover the mortgage. The boys are growing fast. I haven't seen them in over a year. Sometimes I wonder what they've been told. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever reach out. But I don't wait for it. I'm dating someone Mark kind quiet with a laugh that feels like space being made. He doesn't ask about my family. Not yet. And I don't offer. Some ties don't need explaining. Some ties don't need mending. Every once in a while I feel that ache of what could have been. If they'd ever seen me as more than spare parts. If love hadn't come with fine print. But I don't regret saying no. Not anymore. Because peace, I've learned, isn't given. It's claimed.